Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is our Queen of Yucky Science, Heather Montgomery, talking to us about her brand new book, Who Gives a Poop? Before we decide who gives a poop, we want to let you know that if you love inspiring your kids to explore the STEM and STEAM fields, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and art, we want to invite you to check out our brand new podcast. It's called Solve It for Kids. Solve It for Kids is designed for you and your kids to listen to together as we talk to scientists, engineers, astronauts, aquanauts, artists. Talk to them about how they solve problems in their everyday life using creativity, critical thinking, and cooperation. And I say we. When I say we, I mean me and our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson. It is a fantastic show. You can find it at solveitforkids.com. You can also find it on iTunes. Joining us right now from the beautiful state of Alabama, she is our Queen of Yucky Science. Please welcome back to the show, Heather Montgomery. Heather, how are you?
I'm doing great. And yourself?
I'm wonderful. I am here with Augie the doggy in the studio. It is raining. We have wind here in Boston. And when we went for a walk this morning, Augie looked at me and said, no, I'm smart. I know I shouldn't be out there in that kind of weather. I don't know what's wrong with you. Help yourself, but I'm going downstairs to the studio.
That's funny. My research partner, Piper, my dog, yeah, she has that same reaction. So we actually have gorgeous weather here today. So she trotted herself down the driveway very happily. We have a very long driveway, and she found a couple of piles of poop along the way, which was fun because, she helps me do research. That's just what she does. So she's hanging out with me right now.
Well, it's very, very good that she was able to find that, because we're talking about your brand new book, soon to be released, called Who Gives a Poop?
Yeah, it's really, it was a really crazy story. The subtitle kind of says it all. Surprising science from one end to the other. And that is exactly what happened to me. Surprise, surprise, surprise. I went into this book thinking one thing, and, it just kind of turned me on my head, actually. So it was kind of crazy experience as a writer.
Yeah. Well, the idea that you can learn from poop, I guess I became aware of that. I think it was Jurassic Park, where they were looking at the dinosaur poop, and they were able to tell what the dinosaur ate and all that kind of stuff. And I was fascinated by it. I'm like, whoever thought of looking at poop?
Right. Right. Now, dinosaur poop is crazy. In fact, I actually have some fossilized poo right here in my hand. It's kind of cool to be able to hold it and not worry about any germs or anything, right? It's ancient. I happen to have some turtle coprolite, actually. It's so crazy. But, when I look at poop, I think of what a naturalist thinks of. Like, what did it eat and those basic things. But I heard a story about this scientist who used fossilized dinosaur poop for a totally different reason. He's a medical researcher, and he actually used it as a part of a study about joint replacement, which I was like, what? When I heard that, I didn't understand. So, of course, I had to, call the guy and talk to him. It was amazing. He's studying how you can replace a knee. You have to embed the new joint into bone. Well, he had done some studies and no one had paid attention. Well, his studies were important. He understood that there was a problem with the way we've been doing knee replacement. You may know somebody who has a knee replacement, and it doesn't usually last really long. Mm-hmm. There are some issues with them, right? And he's working on that problem. Well, nobody would give him any attention. So he took fossilized dinosaur poop and he did the study using it as the bone because it's a hard material. All he needed was a hard surface, right? A similar type material. Mm-hmm. And of course, the media picked that up because everybody thinks that like doing science with poop is funny. And it is. But the amazing thing is when he did that, his study got all this attention and other people started paying attention to what he was actually discovering, all because of poop, right?
Poop to the rescue. It's
I know. Who would have thought, right, that you would be doing a joint study on the dinosaur poop?
I'm one of those people who may need a knee replacement at some point. I think it would be kind of cool if they could make it out of dinosaur poop. I'd dig that. I'd be like, hey.
Wouldn't that be amazing, right? That's the kind of thing that happened the entire time I was writing this book. Like, these things just hit me out of nowhere. I'm like, how would you ever have figured out that a person would do that? No. You know, like you think of poop as something that you understand what an animal eats. And sure, that's important. But there are other studies. Like there was this phenomenal group of people that have figured out how to use poop to stop poaching. Now, it's a little bit of a complex story, but it's really exciting because they get to use dogs. Uh-huh. What happens is when ivory is poached, mm-hmm. right, from a rhino or an elephant, it has to be shipped, and when it's shipped, is pretty much the only time you catch the poachers. But you don't actually catch the poachers. You can catch the shipment when it comes into a port, right? And so they'll do that, and they'll be like, okay, we can stop the people who are shipping the ivory, but we can't stop the actual poaching. Like it's too late then. The elephants are already dead, right? So what can we do? These brilliant folks figured out that when you have a whole collection of ivory from a shipment, you've got a whole collection of DNA from the animals it came from. Now, DNA is so powerful, right? Because it's the genetic information inside of a cell that identifies each individual being. But it's also powerful because DNA from families is similar. Okay? So what they did is they actually created a map based on the DNA. So they took Africa, like the area that they thought it might have been, the elephants might have been in, and they mapped where this DNA from the ivory was. And then they did something really odd. They went out and trained a bunch of dogs to find elephant poop. Which doesn't really seem to make sense in connecting, right? Mm-hmm. But what they did is they used the dogs to go out and find poop and create a different map. A map. Okay, on the poop, the outside edge of poop has the DNA of the animal that pooped it. Okay. Because your intestines actually shed every time you go, right? It's kind of gross, but it's the way it works. Mucus slides on out there, right? And so they have this entire collection, a map of the DNA of elephants on the land, and then they have a map of the poached. And you could put them together, and when you put them together, you can figure out where the poaching is happening. So the big problem is Africa's huge, and you can't put your finger on where the poachers are. But these maps let them do that.
Wow.
It was phenomenal. They shut down like the two largest cartels of poaching thanks to poop. Right?
Wow.
And pooches.
That is incredible. And I'm at a loss for words because it's so ingenious when you think about that. And I'm just trying to, where would that idea come from? I mean, it's just genius. It's wonderful. And I just love elephants, and that, the poaching and the murder of elephants is so horrible. And, to think that we're saving elephants with poop. This is great.
I know, right? and many lives in many species are being saved by poop. And you're right, it is ingenious. The thing that fascinates me the most, I think, is that a solution like that came out of many, many questions, right? So many people had to be curious and had to figure out one thing and then figure out another thing and figure out another thing. And it's really this huge team effort that's actually worldwide, because people all across the world are doing different parts of this story, right? To come up with a solution. And to me, that's so powerful. And they're doing that again. They're taking that same model and now they're starting to use it on other endangered species. So it doesn't stop with this one thing, it keeps going, and somebody says, oh wait, can we use it on this animal? Can we use it on this animal? I just think it's so brilliant that they do it. And I mean, my dog Piper, she'd love to help out, like she does. I interviewed this one scientist who's training her dogs to do it as well. She has a different question. It's not about poaching, but it's another elephant question. She's training them to find fresh elephant dung. Now, old stuff won't work for her because she wants to understand the hormones. There are questions about why some populations of elephants, they aren't bearing young early enough. Like they're waiting, they're delayed before they're having young elephants. And of course that means fewer calves means fewer elephants. And so she's curious about those and she wants to study their hormones. To get to hormones, you gotta get to the poop fast. So it's so cool. I went and I actually watched her train her dogs. You know what? To do that, she's got to get fresh poop. Well, where do you go to get fresh poop? I mean, she's in Birmingham, Alabama. Where can you go? Every Saturday morning, she goes to the zoo and gets her little packet. And that's how she trains her dog. It's so crazy. Can you imagine being the delivery guy? Hey, look, I got your poop for you today. It's just like, what? But this is how it is. These poop scientists, they're amazing. They just do phenomenal things. And some of them.
It's amazing. I'm wondering when the scientists first presented that idea. Let's help the elephants by looking at poop. I imagine there's a lot of people made fun of that or laughed at it or said it was ridiculous. But it just brings up the idea that, there's a lot of ideas that might seem ridiculous or seem dumb, but when you take the time to look at it and consider it, there's a lot of value out there.
You know what you just hit on? You just hit on one of the things that blew my mind in this whole process, is that we have a lot of bias, right? It's normal bias. It's a normal part of being human. I thought this book was about poop, and it is. But then I thought, no, it's about something deeper. It's like how valuable this stuff is. We call it waste, right? But no. It's like really, really important. Animals use it for all these amazing ways. They use it as a weapon. They use it as food. They use it as shelter. They do all kinds of crazy. So I thought the book was about, it's about animals and how they do all these amazing things. No. Then I thought the book was about scientists who study animals, because that's amazing, right? After I dug and dug and dug into this topic, I discovered the book was really about bias. And it wasn't about scientist bias. It wasn't about other people's bias. It was actually about my own bias. And that just kind of kicked me back, because I thought I was writing this book about poop. And it is about poop. But when I really dug into the topic, I realized the whole time I had been ignoring human poop because, well, it's just too gross. But yet I've been looking at animal poop because it's so much fun and kind of silly, and you can do, right? And it hit me that I was avoiding the very thing I was saying we should do. And that was, I was saying we should look at this product, this waste product, right? And look at how valuable it is. But yet I wasn't willing to look at human poop. And it came back and got me in the end. Yeah. And that's what happens when you dig into a question. That's what happens when you're not when you step past your fear, right? I was afraid to look at human poop because it was too gross or too dangerous or too whatever. And when I really looked at it, it opened my eyes to a new understanding. And that's the power of asking those questions.
So, and you know, Heather and I were talking earlier as to, you know, who typically listens to the Reading with Your Kids podcast. And it's mostly parents and caregivers and grandparents. And this is such an important lesson, I think, for parents, because they need to pass that on to our kids. We're living in a time right now where, we hear from a lot of different scientists. We hear from a lot of different leaders of industry, at least I've heard, that young people today, they're not able to problem solve. They're not able to they're not critical thinkers. They're not able to be leaders. Well, even just, events that have happened in the last week or so here point out that, if you're kind of riffing and you're just kind of thinking, oh, I heard this and, well, maybe we could do this. That's a really dangerous thing, because if people are really, really quick to jump on others and say that's a stupid idea, and how dare you even think that. It's to the point right now where a lot of people are offended, or a lot of people get in trouble just for asking questions and thinking. And that's not a good recipe for the continued success of our society, I don't think. And kids, we need to help our kids understand that it's okay to ask questions.
Yeah, right. And the important thing is that like you said, there's not a right or wrong question. Questions are just that. Now you have to think carefully about how you act.
Right.
But questions are the place to start. Let me tell you a story about this guy. He's a hoot. Brian, he lives in England, and he actually, in the little town where he has, there were these ancient lampposts, right? They were oil, like gas lampposts. Yeah, gas, not oil. And they had been there forever, but they didn't function anymore because they didn't have a gas supply. So that's one part of the story. And so again, that's kind of his background. Well, he's in this place, and this is the situation. And, they're probably going to have to take him down, even though they're beautiful. Well, this guy is a tinkerer, right? Brian is one of those guys that's got an underground laboratory. I mean, seriously, he's got a lab and it's underground. Well, another part of the story is he lives in this neighborhood, and he's just on the path that goes to this really cool trail where everybody walks their dogs. Well, his is the last house, before that. So he's got a little problem, because you got the poop, and sometimes you pick it up and sometimes you don't, but sometimes even when you pick it up in the bag, you just leave it somewhere you shouldn't. And he was not real happy about the fact that there was all this stuff. Well, Brian gets in his lab and he starts tinkering. And this genius man, figures out how to turn dog poop into fuel for those lamps.
Whoa.
Pet poop, right? He's powering the lights with pet poop. So people pick up their little doggy do, and they put it in the biodigester, and they crank it, and the bacteria go to work on this waste product and turn it into wonder, right? All of a sudden, this thing that was a problem, that even if you did the right thing and carried it home and put it in the landfill, it's a problem because it's filling up a landfill, right? He's turned it into fuel for that lamppost.
That's amazing.
And it started with his questions, right? It started with him wondering. Now, can you imagine how many people probably laughed at that idea?
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it wasn't an easy thing. He worked for years on it, right? Because figuring out the engineering of this is tricky. And it took a lot. But now people from all over the world are coming to look at his model to learn, can we do this? There was a group from Japan that came to visit him. There was a group from Pittsburgh that came to him. Can you imagine what would happen to dog parks if we could do this? Right? Yeah. Good stuff.
That it is, and you're right. The dog, the people who were responsible. When I'm out with Augie, the doggy, and I pick up that little thing, I wrap that thing that can degrade. I wrap it up in plastic that can't, so it goes into the landfill, and what could be degraded is never going to degrade because it's in this little plastic baggy thing, along with a bazillion others.
Exactly. And in landfills, that actually causes problems. The fuel that's created by that bacteria, the methane, can cause explosions in landfills if they don't treat it. So, of course, that took me to a landfill, and I did all this great research. I mean, I got to do the coolest research. Did you ever, go to a landfill, like, and sit on top of the mountain of trash. It's really crazy. They have this amazing machine. I mean, it like eats the trash up, which you're like, why do you need to do that? But you need to do that to integrate all the stuff and compress it. It's like this, it's like a monster mower. It's just amazing to watch. Like, the things I get to do as a researcher, I mean, it's pretty awesome.
You know, you're right, and I, you know, that's one of the things being here on doing the podcast, this podcast, and other podcasts. I've had the opportunities to sit down and talk to some of the coolest people in the world, and it is just great. I recently went my whole life being fascinated with space, and I just had a conversation with an astronaut. It was so cool. She made fun of my bald head, but otherwise it was really, really cool. I've sat down and you know, spoken to authors that I've looked up to forever, and it's wonderful, and we get to do this as podcasters, as authors, as researchers. It's such, talk about, you know, it's just like a dream come true. It's so much fun.
And you get to talk to people who are just as excited about their topic, right, or their passion. So you talk about space. I talked to a group of students. They were in college. They figured out how to turn astronaut poop into tools. If you think about it, if you are on a mission to Mars, you kind of have a problem because all that poop, you got to do something with it, right?
It's a lot.
I mean, and you could like chunk it out, right, in space. But number one, it could knock a hole in your ship, and you don't want to do that. But number two, it's something you brought with you, and you don't want to waste anything. I mean, that's everything you have is everything you have for the next however many years. So they're like, well, what could we do with it that's productive, right? Well, the other problem you have is that you need stuff. Like, you need things that you didn't remember to bring, like a wrench, right? You think about wrenches and how you need all kinds of sizes of wrenches. Well, you don't know exactly what you need when you leave. So they figured out a way to grow bacteria on poop, astro poop. There's a fake astro poop solution, a recipe that NASA puts out to help people figure these things out. So they figured out how to grow bacteria, and they tweaked the bacteria's DNA to allow that bacteria to produce plastic. Well, if you've got plastic and you have a 3D printer, you can make whatever you want. Brilliant, right?
Yes.
How amazing is that? That like you could turn poop into plastic and then make a product that you need. I just like, you know, how amazing. These are the problem solvers, right?
Yeah. You know, one of the things I'm excited is that if you know, we joke, we call you the Queen of Yucky Science. I love the approach that you take to science because there's a lot of kids out there. You know, I'm thinking about myself as a young kid. School wasn't always something that was right at the top, and it wasn't fascinating. But boy, oh boy, if you want to talk about, you know, roadkill. I was fascinated by roadkill. You want to talk about poop? You know, you could. I mean, still, poop jokes are just make me happy. You have a kid that maybe isn't, you know, is kind of a reluctant reader, is a reluctant scientist, or reluctant STEMist, but they're a typical 8 or 9-year-old, and they like yucky things. They like talking about poop or whatever. This is a great way just to kind of backdoor it and to, you know, get kids interested in science when they didn't want to be.
Right. You know, I realized there are a whole bunch of poop books for little kids, but people don't generally grow out of that interest. And so, I mean, it's a weird thing, but it's true. Like, we're all intrigued by the body, right? The body is an amazing thing. And so, yeah, one of the reasons that I thought this book would work is that, say, a kid who's 10 years old doesn't necessarily love to read, but yet this is kind of interesting, right? And the interesting thing is, like, we don't grow out of it. So I found that these topics that I'm intrigued by, a lot of people are interested in, and I find that it's just as interesting to discover how we know about this as it is to discover what we know about this, right? because it's cool to know that, yeah, we can save elephants, using their poop. But like the story of how we figured that out is fascinating. I just feel like the science process is something that doesn't get enough attention. Mm-hmm. And fun facts are fun. Don't get me wrong. I love fun facts, but I love to look at like, how did we figure that out? Mm-hmm. Right? How do we know now that whales poop kind of powers the ocean? Right? That's a thing we didn't know about 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And a scientist discovered that, like whales, well, basically they eat at the bottom and they poop at the top, where their poop provides quite the fertilizers, it's feces fertilizer for everything that lives in the ocean. And we didn't know that. Yeah. It's so surprising the things we don't know. And it's so powerful that there's so much more to discover. One of the fun things I get to do with these books is I get to put in a lot of back matter, a lot of information in the back. So like you're a little curious, like there's all these fun stories and there's more to them, right? So I get to put in there links to videos that show you exactly what happens when, whatever, all this information. But I also get to add in things that kids can do. Mm-hmm. Right? Because I think that for me, the doing was what hooked me on science. Mm-hmm. So for example, there's a study that, scientists found that dogs and cats typically, when they go to the bathroom, they, face either north or south. What? And why? And is that really true? So a great activity for a young person to do is if they walk a dog or they have a cat or, whatever, you can go watch other people's animals. I've done it at the dog park just because I wanted to test it out. They can actually go and record it, right? 10 times. Record, take a compass, and see which direction is the animal facing. And it's valuable to record some other variables along the way, like, is there a hill involved? Is there a litter box involved that might be impacting this animal? But you know what I'm saying? Like, the questions start coming. And like, so I did this with my dog, and then I'm like, wait, does she always go on grass or does she prefer other surfaces? Mm-hmm. And then the questions start. And once they start, they don't stop. And that's the power of science. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. And as parents, we should really encourage that with our kids. And I know as parents, when the kids are young and they, it's like, how does that work? And you give them the answer and they go, why? That can get annoying. But we don't want to discourage that because it really is. I think learning, for me, I started learning so much more when I accepted the fact that there was so little that I knew.
Right.
And I had heard that expression in high school and I thought, nah, but it was like once I was able to sit down and go, you know what? I really don't know anything. Just the world opened up because it was like, wow, that's how that works. That's how that works. Whoa, look at what we can learn from poop.
Right. And I think one of the challenges as adults, as either parents or educators, we always feel like we're supposed to have the answers. And as an educator, I've discovered, oh my gosh, if I act that way, then a kid is going to feel that not having answers is a negative. Mm-hmm. But I actually think that not having the answers is a positive. Because when we don't have answers, we dig. Our brain wants to dig further. If we're given an answer, boom, we're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of sad. That shuts off the learning. So a challenge as an adult is to learn to help a kid go further with their own question rather than shut it down. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's a tough thing sometimes, but I realize that just asking a child, what else are you wondering? What else? What else? What other questions do you have? A lot of times, the first question is a what question. I mean, here, for example, this poop right here. I got some poop on my hand, right? What is it? Well, what is an okay question? But to me, it's not the most interesting question. Mm-hmm. The most interesting question might be, why is it here? Where did it come from? What kinds of material do we see in it? Right? Obviously, we don't want to go digging in poop, which is dangerous. However, there are safe ways to study poop, just like I mentioned the study earlier. with the dog poop.
Yeah.
So asking kids, redirecting them to take their questions further, I think is so powerful. Somebody asked me one time, Heather, actually they ask me this a lot, where do your ideas come from, right? They ask writers that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's not my issue. I have tons of ideas. I have tons of, my challenge is, that there's so many, it's hard to pick through them, and have time for them. But I got to thinking about that. Where do why do I have so many? And I realized because I think in my family growing up, we just asked lots of questions. Mm-hmm. And we were okay when we didn't have answers. We tried, like we put together ideas, right? And we made guesses as a family, and we had like discussions about what we thought, like, I think it's this and I think it's this. And my brother and I still do that. I was on a hike with him one day and I was like, oh, this is why I think like this as a writer, because we've always done it that way. And it wasn't okay for me to say, oh, I think this is this beetle. No, he's going to have to say, no, well, why? He's going to have to like push back against me. Mm-hmm. And that little bit of pushback helps me dig deeper mm-hmm. and find some evidence, right? If he has a different idea, then it causes me to dig deeper, and we go back and forth in a friendly way. And that is culturing this inquiry in the family. Yeah. I think it's kind of a family culture.
Yeah. Wow. This is so cool. I can talk to you for hours I talk about poop for hours. I want to make sure now Who Gives a Poop is going to be available in September. It's available on for pre-order right now. But if you're just dying to have one of Heather's books in your hands, there is a great book. The last book she published was called Little Monsters of the Ocean, Metamorphosis Under the Waves. Can you give us a quick little preview of what we'll find inside that book?
Sure, because, butterflies and frogs is just about all we ever hear about. I mean, they're awesome, right? And they go through metamorphosis, this amazing process. But wait, why do they get all the credit? Do you realize that thousands and thousands of organisms in the ocean just go through amazing metamorphosis? There's this crazy kid. He's called a philosoma. He stands on top of a jellyfish. He's a kid, and he stands on top of jellyfish. As an adult, he looks like a lobster, and he lives in the bottom of the ocean. And I wanted to know why. Why does he stand on the top of the jellyfish? How does he eat jellyfish stingers? And how come, there's metamorphosis anyway? I mean, what's the good of that process? Mm-hmm. And so this was an amazing look at all the things. A jellyfish kid doesn't look like a jellyfish adult. Most people don't know that. It looks kind of more like a plant. I mean, all of these crazy things in the ocean, they go through this process. And I wanted to know what, why, how, where, when, and the questions just kept coming. And the amazing thing about that book is I discovered a 6-year-old who had made a discovery about the ocean that his parents, who were both scientists studying this crazy organism, had never even realized. He discovered 4 new species, all because he was willing to look at the kids in the ocean, not the adults.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
It's so amazing what happens when we open our minds up to this idea of following questions. Yeah. And there's a whole ocean out there of unknown. Wow. For kids to dig into.
That is so cool. I'm just, and what you brought up about the little 6-year-old discovering something that his 2 scientist parents had never seen. Sometimes when we're stuck with a problem, our first inclination is to call the expert in. And that makes a lot of sense. But sometimes the best thing to do is to bring somebody in who knows absolutely nothing about this, because they're looking at it with completely different eyes, and they may see something that we've become blind to, that the experts have become blind to.
It's so true. So true. Kids have amazing power to do that. And I think we as adults do too, if we kind of let go of all the filters that we've installed in our brains, mm-hmm. right? And kids can help us do that. That's why one of the reasons I love working with kids so much, because when I teach, kids remind me that I've restricted my own view to such a narrow area. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But children don't have those walls built yet. And the power of thinking this way is that those walls don't get permanently in place in their brains. Mm-hmm. So in the future, they have this plasticity of thinking for no matter what problem they come up to. You know, we're talking about crazy monsters of the ocean, right? Kind of a weird thing. And probably most people are not going to go on to be oceanographers, you know, or marine scientists. But when they develop a mindset for looking at questions, being curious, and kind of a mental construct for how to pursue a question, it's such a powerful thing for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. I'm telling you, this is just such this is family reading together at its best, because it starts with reading the books together by Heather Montgomery, and it just leads to all sorts of discovery and a lifelong passion expedition into the world around us. Heather, just remind everybody, please, where they can connect with you online.
Sure. HeatherLMontgomery.com is a great place. And I'm also on Twitter at HeatherLMont, Heather L. Mont, because Montgomery is such a long name. Doesn't fit.
It does. It does. Well, we've had such a great time speaking to the author of Who Gives a Poop, our Queen of Yucky Science, Heather L. Montgomery. Heather, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great. Enjoyed it so much.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Scott Rubin. He will be here to tell us about a really fun book called Naming Your Little Geek. That is the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. If you are the author of a fantastic children's book, we would love to have you as a guest on the show. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of people about your fantastic book. All you need to do is go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, click on the contact button you'll find at the bottom of the page. Let us know about your great book. We will let you know the next easy steps. Right now, the next easy step for me is to thank the people who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start with our guest, our queen of all things yucky in science, Heather Montgomery. Be sure to check out Who Gives a Poop. Also want to thank my incredible team, starting with my amazing producer, Fatima Khan. I want to thank my awesome author, Ambassador Peggy Cotto. And most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much for subscribing to the show. But most of all, thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.